Let's talk books. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Long time no see. I know it has been several months, okay? I just haven't been home to film. It's been a really busy year of just traveling and work, and I also have so many travel vlogs. I still haven't edited, from hiking in the Dolomites and the Alta Via to Prague and Budapest, Vienna, even back to Greece and south of France. It is so bad. My goal this winter is to edit all my vlogs. I think I'm just too much of a perfectionist that I get overwhelmed to edit and I just don't do it at all. In terms of book videos, I've read quite a bit this year. Let me pull up my Goodreads. So as of the day I'm filming this, December 9th, I have read 73 books this year. My goal is 75. Definitely think I'll hit that. I'm currently reading No Name in the Street by James Baldwin, and then I plan to read a couple more fiction after that for the end of the year. But for today's video, I wanted to talk about my 13 favorite books I read in 2025, which is super exciting. Of the 13 books I read, 3 are classics, 4 are translated fiction, and then 5 are sort of just in that literary fiction sphere. It was kind of hard to narrow down. There were so many great books this year. I'm also going to talk about my favorite books that were released in 2025 as well, maybe in a separate video. I'll split it up, but for today I'm just going to talk about the 13 favorite books that I read. First one I'm going to talk about is The Dark Side of Skin. I would have talked about this in my recap for Q1 at the beginning of the year. This is a translated fiction from Brazil. It's 202 pages and it is just an absolutely searing portrait of Brazilian culture, race, family, identity. It threads memories from different relationships and times and perspectives, and it culminates with the end of a life. This is such a short yet impactful read. I love the Charco Press books. Over the last 2 years, I've read quite a bit of South American fiction and Latin American fiction. A lot of it is through Charco Press. This is one I had high hopes for and it absolutely lived up to the hype. I highly recommend if you're looking for a piece of Brazilian translated fiction. Just absolutely gorgeous. The next one I don't currently have with me. I've lent it to a friend, but it is very, very popular and for good reason. I think it's won a lot of awards for Book of the Year by many booksellers, and that is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. Again, I also read this at the beginning of the year. For those that don't know, I am a huge Charlotte McConaughey fan. Migrations is one of my favorite books of all time, 100%. I absolutely fell in love with her writing with that book, and Wild Dark Shore absolutely lived up to the hype. I'm so happy to see her popularity grow and see the public love her writing as much as I have for the last few years. She's such a master in this sort of thrilling, environmentally charged literary fiction. It's atmospheric, it's poignant with the times. She always has these very incredibly complex and flawed characters that are so multidimensional you can't just help but root for, but they're never going to be the perfect protagonist. I've just absolutely loved her writing. I'm so happy to watch her grow this year, and this is definitely a book I'd recommend to anybody and everybody, even people that don't read that much. This is a very accessible literary fiction. It's like a literary fiction, borderline thriller, mystery. It is very, very well done. I would call it also environment fiction, if that makes sense, or climate change fiction. It revolves a lot about changing of the climate, and it also will just keep you on the edge of your seat. And that was 298 pages. Moving on to my next book, I also read this at the beginning of the year. I originally borrowed it from the library. I fell in love with it and I knew I had to pick up my own copy, and that is The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles. This is an LGBTQ historical fiction. It's just under 300 pages, and this is about a young man who returns to his 1986 small Appalachian town from New York to die amidst the AIDS crisis. This is such a heart-wrenching and impactful piece of literature. I implore everybody to read this. It is equally devastating as it is captivating. Even though it's a short book, it is just so well written. I don't have much to say other than pick it up. The next book I have is also one of the most popular books of the year. I think it won the Goodreads prize for literary fiction, and that is My Friends by Frederick Bachman. This is not translated, unlike a lot of his past works. He wrote this one in English. At first I wasn't sure if I liked the style of the writing in this one specifically, but it really grew on me as the story continued. Some people didn't like this book. I don't know if it's because of his books all have a pretty similar style or the writing, but I really enjoyed it. I want to read you my review, and I wrote, "How could the sea be big enough to have room for their hearts? Incomprehensible." As I was going through this book, I wasn't sure how I would rate it. The content was so beautifully Frederick Bachman at his best, but the way it was written from a technical standpoint, I wasn't sure if I liked it. However, as the book went on, the more and more I was hypnotized, the more I was invested, and the more I had tears in my eyes on the plane again. His continual ability to paralyze us as readers with vivid and intentional storytelling makes this story impossible to forget. My Friends is a testament to the fearlessness of childhood, the influence of grief, and the fervor of art. At its core, it's a story about love between friends, lovers, parents, and siblings. It's about the acts of love and everything we do in our power to keep them alive. I can't wait for everyone to read this book, a favorite 2025 release that will be remembered for years to come. That is My Friends by Frederick Bachman. I hope you read it. I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. The next book I have on my list is a translated fiction from Germany, and it is 272 pages, and that is The End of Loneliness by Benedict Wells. I read this back in April when I was in New York, and this is just my kind of book. It is a sad coming-of-age translated fiction. It was absolutely seared into my brain, broke my heart in two. If you like devastating coming-of-age reads, you will love this. That is all I'm gonna say. Okay, I'm gonna combine the next two books as they are part of a series. This series is no other than Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan Quartet. The two favorites I'm including this year is the second book, Story of a New Name, and the last book, The Story of the Lost Child. I have the other two books here. The entire series is just so wonderfully written. I love how she writes the friendship between these two protagonists and just going through decades of their life from childhood to adulthood and motherhood and everything in between. The reason why I like these two the best specifically is for the second one. I said the diverging trajectories of Elena and Leela's lives during this book is nothing if not equally extraordinary and devastating. What an epic. The first book really builds the characters from the ground up, and in the second book you just really see the consequences of their actions and how their lives unfold, so I really enjoyed reading about that in the second one. The fourth one was just an absolute roller coaster. The end of their chapters and motherhood and adulthood, it was just such an epic conclusion to this 4-book series. I definitely recommend. I also really want to watch the TV show. The entire series is phenomenal, but these two top favorite. The next book I have was probably my favorite of the summer. It is not a translated fiction, but the author is from Croatia, and that is Slanting Towards the Sea by Lydia Hilly. She very kindly sent me this book all the way from Croatia. It was just the absolute perfect summer read. I'm also going to read you my review from this because I loved it so much. So I said, this is an absolute must summer read. Lydia paints a luminous portrait of flawed characters and undoubtedly complex relationships set against the coastal Croatian landscape. Spanning 20 years, we follow Ivana and her relationships with herself, her ex-husband, and her family, as well as her country. It is an exploration of identity, grief, desire, and life. For those who love Sally Rooney and Elena Ferrante, you will love Lydia's writing. She is unequivocally intentional and lyrically thoughtful with each word on the page. Her commentary on Croatia is vibrant, vivid, and rich. It seemingly feels like it was written on an olive grove at sunset on a late summer day. So thank you to Lydia again for sending this to me. Definitely one of my favorite debut authors of 2025, and also just one of my favorite books in general. Also, this cover, like, can we appreciate how beautiful the Canadian US edition is? No notes. I love it. That is a literary fiction from Croatia. The next book I have is also another summer favorite. It is also an LGBTQ historical fiction, and that is Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt. This was also published in 2025. I read his memoir biography previously. You can tell he's just such a poet with the way he writes. He's so lyrical. It's just the most gorgeous writing, and his fiction is no different. This is sort of a coming of age story about a relationship between, or a friendship I should say, between two boys, and it was just so gorgeously written, and it really underlines what does it mean to love, what are different types of love, how are they reciprocated. If you love just absolutely lyrical prose, this is a wonderful summer read on the cusp of adulthood. It's kind of a coming of age. It's also just in general about, I guess, I don't want to spoil it, but is it about unrequited love? What kind of love is it? Another great 2025 release. Moving into my fall favorites. This next one is by one of my favorite authors of all time. I've read multiple of his books before 2025 and quite a few as well this year. This one specifically is my favorite of the year, and that is Just Above My Head by James Baldwin. This is just an absolute classic literary fiction. edition. It comes in at 584 pages. You'll also see the last few books of the year are some of my thickest books, I will say. The back of the book says, "The stark grief of a brother mourning a brother opens this novel with a stunning, unforgettable experience. Here, in a monumental saga of love and rage, Baldwin goes back to Harlem, to the church of his groundbreaking novel Go Tell It on the Mountain, to the homosexual passion of Giovanni's room, and to the political fire that inflames his nonfiction work. Here, too, the story of gospel singer Arthur Hall and his family becomes both a journey into another country of the soul and senses, and a living contemporary history of black struggle in this land." It's just such an incredible book. My very short review of this was, his commentary on sexuality, grief, race, religion, family, and friendship was at the foreground in this journey from New York to Paris to southern USA to London. His writing is blunt and honest and true and singular. Forever one of my favorite authors. I don't know if I would say this is the first Baldwin to pick up. I still think Another Country is my favorite Baldwin of all time, one of my favorite books of all time. Giovanni's Room also is obviously great. All of his other work, his nonfiction work, I don't know, you can't go wrong with which one you pick first. This is just a very thick one. I believe this is one of his later books he wrote. If Beale Street Could Talk, I also read that this year. It was a really great book. He has so many, depending on nonfiction, if you want a shorter read, a thicker read. This and Another Country, his two longer books I've read, are probably my favorites as well. I love being able to sink my teeth into his writing. The next book I read is also a classic. This is a translated fiction from Hungary. This is Abigail by Magda Szabo. I don't know if I said that correctly. One of my favorite things to do when I'm traveling is reading a book that's set in the country I'm visiting or written by an author, that is from that country. I read Abigail when I was visiting Budapest and Hungary in November, and it was just such an out-of-body experience. This is a really gorgeous piece of literature. It threads the reality of World War II Hungary into a coming-of-age tale. I loved her writing so much. If you can't tell already, I love a good coming-of-age fiction regardless of the country, the setting, wherever it's from. Her writing is so beautiful. I definitely think next to Baldwin, she's one of my favorite 20th century writers. I cannot wait to read more of her backlog in 2026. This was a very great introductory read of her work, but I definitely want to get to the door in her other works as well next year. Moving on to the final two books. The second to last book of the year is an absolute monster. It is almost 1,300 pages long. It is a classic translated fiction from France. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I have been wanting to get to this book for so many years, and I finally decided to commit to it. I began reading this in August and was reading it sort of behind the scenes of all the other books I was reading throughout the year, and it wasn't until November when I hit that 50% mark that I've started really investing in it and then just locked in and read the book to the end. Again, with Abigail, I was in France in November, so it was a really fun experience being able to read scenes that were set in Paris while I was there. I freaking loved this book. I'm gonna read you my review of it as well. Again, I started this in August. I said, I can't believe it's over. I started this book nearly 4 months ago, a meandering tome in the background of my other reads. It wasn't until November I truly locked in and prioritized The Count. Once I hit that halfway mark, around 600 pages, I was utterly enraptured by his journey of orchestrated revenge, but also his transformation of forgiveness and realization of self. This is a book I'm unsurprised that was published in segments. However, despite its length, it keeps readers compelled as we follow Edward Dantes through decades of adulthood where he becomes a man armed with relentless retribution for the men who destroyed his life. It is the epitome of a layered and intricate story. Dumas ensures no detail is amiss. Although the Count is an undoubtedly worthy protagonist, the story would not be as rich as it is without its secondary characters. Their varying ethos and pathos play critical pawns on the Count's stage. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would say out of all the classics I've read, The Count is actually quite accessible despite its length, especially the Penguin Classics edition. I don't want to call it an easy read. I just found the translation quite accessible. He's kind of just a yapper for 1,300 pages. This is really just a long book of gossip and revenge, of course. I would recommend everyone and anyone to pick up this book. Yeah, honestly, I loved it so much. Once I finished it, I couldn't get enough, and so I watched the 2024 French film, which was actually for free on Canopy, which this isn't sponsored, but if you have a library card, you have access to so many resources, and one of those, for at least my library card, is Canopy, and that is where you get access to free movies and films, and so that's what I watched Count of Monte Cristo on. That movie even though, okay, quick pause about books, that movie was so beautiful and so cinematic. My only qualm is it deviates from the plot of the book, particularly the ending, if you know you know, which was a bit disheartening, but if you absorb it as a standalone, it is a very, very great movie. So I do recommend that, and I'm excited to watch Sam Claflin's miniseries that's coming out in 2026. But yes, this monster is complete. I can't wait to see what other classics I get to next year. The last book I'm going to talk about is a fantasy that came out this year. It is also by one of my favorite authors, and it is Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. This is a dark academia fantasy. It is nearly 600 pages. I want to say like 550. It also had divided reviews, I would say. I think some people call it pretentious. Not sure if they like the romance. There's a lot of references that people don't quite understand. Listen, I ate this up. I don't know what it is about books that involve a journey or a road, literally like The Road or Piranesi. I just love those kind of books, and I really enjoyed the references to this. I love the math behind it. I studied physics in undergrad, and I just found it really interesting and exciting. I do see when people said it kind of drags on for a bit in the middle, and there definitely could have been some changes on their actual journey to hell, and people preferred the flashbacks of when they were in university. All valid criticisms. I still just really, really enjoyed it. I love her writing. This with Babel, also The Poppy War. I still haven't read Yellowface yet. I just am always engrossed with her writing. So that is my final favorite of 2025. If you lasted this long in the video, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments below if we share any favorites from 2025. I'm sorry it's been so long since I filmed a video. 2026, my goal is to be better about that. There's gonna be a lot of changes in my life next year, which is exciting. So we'll see where YouTube goes as well. I am gonna film a separate video of my 2025 book awards of books that were released in 2025, so stay tuned for that. If you wish to see more frequent book content, my reviews are always on Goodreads, as well as Instagram and TikTok. I am much more frequent on than YouTube. Obviously, it's been several months, but on those I post at least a couple times a week, and I'm better at keeping up with. But I hope to see you back for the next video. Next one should be 2025 book awards, and then I will do a full recap of every book I've read as well this year, and book mail, of course. So I'll see you guys in the next video.